Dawn on a pirate ship was rarely peaceful. The first light crept through torn sails and rigging, but most men had already been awake for hours, disturbed by the constant groan of timbers and the slap of waves against the hull. Sleep came in snatches, stolen between watches, and hammocks swung tightly together in the damp, musty air of the lower deck. Rats skittered across the beams, and the stench of salt, sweat, and rotting wood lingered everywhere. For many pirates, waking was less a fresh start than a reminder of another grueling day at sea. The cramped quarters offered no privacy. Dozens of men shared the same space, their hammocks tied to any beam that would hold. Snores, coughs, and the muttered curses of restless sleepers filled the air. A sailor might wake with bruises from being jostled or from striking the wooden planks in rough seas. Light seeped through gaps above, but it only revealed the grime and mildew that clung to every surface. For those who lived aboard, the ship was both home and prison, inescapable and unforgiving. Morning duties began immediately. Before food or rest, the crew was ordered to clean the deck, pump out bilge water, and inspect ropes and sails. Orders rang from the quarterdeck, and the men obeyed with weary speed. Laziness was not tolerated, for a poorly maintained ship could mean disaster in the next storm or battle. Pirates might have been outlaws, but their survival depended on strict routine. To wake aboard meant stepping straight into labor, hands blistered by ropes before the sun was high. Yet even amid the harshness, there was camaraderie. Jokes and insults were exchanged as men hauled buckets of seawater across the deck. The creak of ropes and the flapping of sails set the rhythm of the day. Life aboard a pirate ship began not with leisure but with toil, and every man understood that his effort kept the vessel afloat. To wake on such a ship was to wake into a world where discipline, danger, and survival blended into the unrelenting reality of life at sea. Meals on a pirate ship were less about satisfaction and more about survival. Fresh food vanished within days of leaving port, leaving the crew to rely on salted meat, hardtack, and dried beans. The hardtack, biscuits baked until nearly indestructible, was so tough that men often soaked it in water or rum just to bite through it. Worms and weevils were common guests in the bread, but hunger forced men to eat without complaint. Salted pork and beef, stored in barrels, grew rancid quickly under the tropical sun. A meal often carried as much risk of sickness as nourishment. Water was the greater concern. Stored in casks, it quickly turned foul, reeking of mold and slime. Sailors drank it reluctantly, straining it through cloth or mixing it with alcohol to mask the taste. Rum, captured or bought cheaply in port, became the true lifeblood of the ship. It numbed pain, dulled hunger, and lifted spirits, though it also fueled quarrels and recklessness. To many pirates, rum was both comfort and curse, a daily escape from the bleakness of life at sea. Fresh provisions were treasures seized during raids or found when landing on remote islands. Coconuts, fruit, and fish were devoured eagerly, though such feasts were rare and fleeting. Pirates knew the value of these moments when for a brief time they could eat and drink like kings. But soon enough, the ship's diet returned to its monotony, and men chewed on stale bread with missing teeth and drank brackish water that left their stomachs churning. Meals were taken together, seated on deck or below, with no ceremony. The food bonded them as much as it punished them, for all shared in the same misery. Stories were told, dice rattled, and laughter echoed as hard bread was broken. Eating aboard a pirate ship was never pleasant, but it was a ritual that reminded the crew they were united, not only by plunder and danger, but also by the meager scraps that kept them alive on the endless sea. Life aboard a pirate ship was built on constant labor. The sea demanded unending vigilance, and every man was expected to work from dawn until exhaustion. The most basic task was maintaining the ship itself, scrubbing the deck clean with seawater and sand, patching torn sails, and splicing ropes frayed by salt and wind. These chores were not glamorous, but they kept the vessel seaworthy. A ship neglected was a death sentence. One weak plank or one rotted rope could doom everyone aboard. The rigging was the true workplace of many sailors. High above the deck, men climbed the swaying masts, barefoot or in worn shoes, clinging to ropes as the ship pitched beneath them. There they furled or unfurled sails, adjusted lines, and kept constant watch for enemy ships or approaching storms. The work was dangerous. One slip meant a fatal plunge into the sea. Yet many pirates grew so skilled that they could move across the rigging as easily as others walked on solid ground. Their agility became their pride, proof of survival in a hostile world. Below deck, other tasks demanded equal endurance. Cannons had to be scrubbed free of rust, powder stored safely, and supplies organized in the crowded hold. Bilge water, the foul mix of seawater, rot, and waste, was pumped out daily, filling the air with stench. The ship's carpenter repaired cracks, while the surgeon, if one was aboard, sharpened tools in grim anticipation of battle wounds. Even in moments without threat, the labor never ceased. There was always rope to coil, sails to stitch, or barrels to shift. For pirates, daily work was as vital as raiding. Discipline and duty kept the ship afloat as surely as cannon fire won them treasure. While the world ashore imagined pirates as wild rogues, life at sea was ruled by sweat, rope, and endless maintenance. Every pirate was both outlaw and laborer, his freedom bought with blistered hands and aching muscles. The ship was their fortune, and only through constant toil did it remain their home and their weapon. A pirate's clothing was not the polished costume seen in films, but a patchwork of whatever could be stolen, traded, or stitched from rags. Most began with the plain garments of sailors, loose shirts of linen or cotton, coarse breeches, and simple caps or bandanas to shield their heads from the sun. Boots were rare. Many went barefoot to grip the slick deck more easily. The sea quickly wore everything down, leaving shirts threadbare, trousers torn, and colors faded by salt and sun. What mattered most was not fashion, but survival in the harsh environment of the ocean. Despite this, pirates were known for flamboyance when plunder allowed it. A captured merchant's chest might provide silk waistcoats, fine boots, or bright sashes, and these became trophies as much as clothing. A scarlet scarf knotted around the waist or a feather in a hat marked status and individuality. Jewelry, gold earrings, silver rings, or strings of beads was common, partly for display, but also for practicality. Valuable trinkets could be traded or pawned in port. A pirate's appearance was as much about identity as necessity, signaling pride in his freedom from ordinary life. Hygiene, however, was a constant challenge. Clothes were rarely washed properly, often soaked in seawater and left to dry stiff with salt. Parasites thrived in the unclean fabric, and lice were a common nuisance. Pirates made do by shaving their heads or trimming beards roughly with knives. Scars, missing teeth, and tattoos marked their bodies, each telling a story of battles fought, punishments endured, or ports visited. Their rough and intimidating look was both the product of hardship and a weapon of fear against their enemies. Altogether, the pirate's appearance reflected his life, practical, ragged, and occasionally extravagant. Each man carried the sea on his back. Salt-stained clothes, sunburned skin, and eyes hardened by endless horizons. Yet among the grime and scars, flashes of color and stolen finery revealed their hunger not just for survival, but for a taste of freedom and defiance. Their ragged silhouettes against the rigging became the very image of piracy, part terror, part legend, and wholly unforgettable. If storms and battles did not claim a pirate's life, sickness often did. A ship packed with men, lacking sanitation, was a breeding ground for disease. The greatest terror was scurvy, caused by a lack of fresh fruit and vegetables. Gums swelled and bled, teeth loosened, and bodies weakened until men could barely stand. Dysentery spread quickly in the cramped quarters, leaving crews weakened and dehydrated. Fever, infected wounds, and mysterious ailments were constant companions at sea, and there was little chance of true recovery without landfall. Medical care aboard was crude at best. A ship's surgeon, if one was present, was often a barber or former butcher who relied more on experience than knowledge. Their tools were terrifying: saws, knives, and heated irons used without anesthesia. Amputations were performed to save men from gangrene, but the survival rate was low. For smaller wounds, rum served as antiseptic and painkiller alike. More often, pirates relied on superstition, herbs gathered in port, or sheer luck to recover. Illness was not only a danger but also a reminder of how fragile life at sea truly was. Injuries from daily life were equally severe. A slip on wet rigging could shatter bones, while hauling heavy ropes tore muscles and left lasting pain. Battles brought cuts from cutlasses, burns from cannon fire, and splinter wounds from shattered decks. Infection was the real enemy. Even a minor scratch could fester into something deadly. Pirates accepted this risk as part of their existence. They joked about scars, wore them as badges of pride, but quietly feared the sickness that often followed. The constant threat of illness gave pirates a grim resilience. They drank, laughed, and fought with the knowledge that tomorrow might bring fever or infection. The image of a pirate as immortal and carefree was far from the truth. Every man lived under the shadow of sickness. Yet this very danger fueled their boldness. With death always near, they lived each day recklessly, seeking fortune and freedom before disease or injury dragged them below the waves. For pirates, no battle struck as much terror as the fury of the sea itself. Storms descended without warning, black clouds swallowing the horizon, winds howling like demons. Waves rose higher than the masts, crashing against the hull with enough force to splinter planks. Lightning illuminated the chaos in blinding flashes, revealing faces pale with fear as men clung to ropes and prayed not to be swept overboard. In those moments, the ocean was not just water, it was a living monster, capable of devouring ship and crew alike. Sailors scrambled desperately during storms, reefing sails to prevent the masts from snapping and bailing water from the flooding deck. The noise was deafening, the roar of waves, the shriek of wind through rigging, and the captain's command shouted against the storm. Every man had his place, and failure meant catastrophe. Pirates who lived by freedom and rebellion suddenly became bound by absolute discipline, their lives depending on unity. The sea did not forgive mistakes. The fear extended beyond the storm itself. Tales spread of ghost ships glimpsed through rain, of monstrous sea creatures rising from the depths, of men dragged down by invisible hands. Even the most hardened pirate might mutter a prayer or kiss a charm tucked into his shirt when the skies darkened. The ocean's unpredictability fed countless superstitions, and storms became proof that human power was nothing compared to the might of nature. When the clouds finally broke and sunlight returned, the deck bore scars. Broken spars, torn sails, and exhausted men slumped against the rails. Survival was never guaranteed, and each storm endured was a narrow escape from death. Pirates celebrated afterward with drink and song, but beneath the laughter lingered awe and fear. The storm reminded them that the sea was both their stage and their master, an endless, unpredictable force against which even the fiercest pirate was small. Though pirates are remembered as rebels and outlaws, their ships were far from lawless. Survival demanded order, and every crew lived by a strict code. Known as the Articles, these agreements outlined shares of plunder, rules for conduct, and punishments for disobedience. A man caught stealing from his mates or shirking duty risked harsh penalties. Equality existed, but discipline was ironclad. Without it, the fragile balance aboard would collapse into chaos, and chaos at sea meant death. Punishments were severe and often public. The most feared was marooning, abandoning a man on a deserted island with little more than water and a pistol. Few survived such exile, and the threat kept men obedient. Flogging with ropes or belts was common for lesser offenses, leaving backs raw and scarred. Some captains forced offenders to run the gauntlet, walking between rows of shipmates who struck them with ropes or sticks. These rituals of discipline were as much a warning to the crew as a punishment to the offender. Yet pirate justice was not purely cruel. Many crews prided themselves on fairness. Disputes were settled by vote, and punishments, though harsh, were usually agreed upon collectively. The captain himself could be removed if he abused power or failed in battle. In this sense, pirate ships practiced a rough democracy, balancing freedom with responsibility. Discipline was not about submission to one man, but about protecting the survival of all. Still, fear was ever present. Every pirate knew that one mistake, a stolen coin, a cowardly act in battle, or even drunken violence, could bring brutal consequences. Punishment maintained order, but it also reminded men that life at sea was fragile, and loyalty to the code was all that stood between them and ruin. In a world of danger, pirates relied not only on swords and cannons, but on the discipline that bound them together against the merciless sea. Life on the ocean was filled with uncertainty, and pirates, like all sailors, clung to superstition to explain what they could not control. Every voyage was shadowed by omens. A black cat crossing the deck could mean good luck in one port and disaster in another. Whistling while on board was strictly forbidden, for it was believed to call up fierce winds. Even the simple act of cutting nails or hair at sea was thought to tempt fate, as if the ship itself might take offense. Superstition was woven into daily routine, guiding behavior as strongly as the articles. The greatest fear was the curse of bad luck. A ship renamed without proper ceremony was doomed, and killing a seabird, especially an albatross, was considered a sin that invited storms. Dolphins swimming near the bow were seen as protectors, while sharks circling the ship foretold death. Many pirates carried personal charms: a silver coin sewn into clothing, a piece of wood from home, or a tattoo believed to ward off drowning. In a world where survival often hinged on chance, these tokens offered comfort against the vast uncertainty of the sea. Storms and strange sightings deepened belief in the supernatural. Glowing lights on the masts, known as St. Elmo's fire, were seen as either a blessing from saints or a warning of approaching doom. Tales of ghost ships drifting silently across the waves spread fear through even the bravest crews. Some swore that drowned sailors returned as spirits, haunting the waters where they perished. At night, when the sea glimmered with eerie phosphorescence, men whispered of souls trapped beneath the waves. Superstitions gave pirates a fragile sense of control. By obeying taboos, carrying charms, and reading omens, they believed they could tip fortune in their favor. While their lives were reckless and violent, they were also ruled by respect for unseen powers. For every cannon fired and treasure seized, there was also a whispered prayer, a charm clutched in the palm, and a wary glance at the restless horizon. For pirates, fear and faith traveled together across the endless sea. Despite the danger and endless toil, pirates carved out moments of leisure to break the monotony of life at sea. Between storms, raids, and repairs, the deck could transform into a place of noise and laughter. Dice games were the favorite pastime, played with bones or crude wooden cubes, often for coins, rations, or clothing. Cards also circulated, though cheating was common, and fights could erupt as quickly as laughter. Gambling was a release, but also a risk. Friendships made and broken in the span of an evening. Music filled the ship whenever instruments could be found. Fiddles, drums, and pipes stolen from ports or prizes provided rhythm for sea shanties, songs that kept time during work and lifted spirits in rest. Pirates sang of lost loves, past battles, or imagined riches, their voices rising above the creak of timbers and the endless hiss of waves. Even those without instruments used spoons, barrels, or hands to create beats. Music was not simply entertainment, it was medicine for weary souls, binding men together in shared rhythm. Storytelling was another treasured pastime. Around lantern light, men spun tales of haunted ships, monstrous sea creatures, or treasures buried on distant islands. Some stories were warnings, others pure invention, but all gave men escape from the endless horizon. Laughter echoed as exaggerations grew wilder, and fear stirred when old sailors whispered of curses and ghostly encounters. These stories fed both imagination and superstition, reminding pirates that their world was part myth as much as reality. Drink, of course, was never far away. Rum fueled celebrations, dulled pain, and sparked quarrels that sometimes ended in blood. Yet for all its dangers, leisure was vital. Without moments of play, music, or storytelling, life at sea would have been unbearable. These pastimes did not erase the hardships of piracy, but they gave men brief glimpses of joy and camaraderie, a reminder that even outlaws needed laughter to balance fear. When a target was sighted, the mood aboard a pirate ship shifted instantly from idleness to fierce readiness. Lookouts shouted from the mast, and the crew sprang into motion, trimming sails and readying weapons. Every man knew his role. Gunners prepared the cannons, boarders sharpened cutlasses and axes, and the helmsman angled the ship for pursuit. The air grew thick with anticipation, fear, and excitement. For pirates, battle was both deadly work and the moment they lived for, the chance to seize treasure and prove their courage. Cannons thundered as ships drew close, their smoke choking the decks and obscuring the sea. Splinters flew like arrows when iron shot smashed into wooden hulls, tearing sails and shattering masts. Amid the roar, men loaded and fired in a desperate rhythm, sweat streaming as they hauled powder and rammed shot. Cannons rarely sank ships outright. The true aim was to cripple the target so it could be boarded. Victory was measured not by destruction, but by capture, for the plunder lay within. Then came the most feared moment, boarding. Grappling hooks flew across the gap, ropes tightened, and pirates swarmed onto enemy decks. Cutlasses clashed, pistols cracked, and axes swung in the chaos of close combat. Blood slicked the planks as men fought hand to hand. Victory decided by ferocity as much as numbers. Shouts of rage, cries of pain, and the crash of steel created a deafening storm. Pirates thrived in this brutality, relying on speed and terror to overwhelm disciplined but less desperate crews. When the smoke cleared and the last defender surrendered, silence fell, broken only by groans of the wounded and the crackle of damaged timbers. For the victors, relief mingled with triumph. Another prize had been taken, though at a terrible cost. For the defeated, mercy depended on the mood of their captors. Battles were brief but savage, leaving scars on wood, flesh, and memory alike. To live as a pirate meant living always on the edge of violence, where one shout from the lookout could plunge the crew into blood and glory. After the clash of cannon fire and the chaos of boarding, the most anticipated moment arrived, dividing the spoils. The plundered cargo was hauled onto the pirate ship. Barrels of rum, crates of spices, bolts of silk, or chests of coins if fortune truly favored them. The atmosphere shifted from blood and smoke to eager celebration as men crowded the deck, eyes fixed on the loot. For pirates, treasure was not just wealth, it was freedom, proof that their risks and hardships had meaning. Unlike naval crews or merchant sailors, pirates prided themselves on fairness in division. The Articles of Agreement spelled out exactly how shares were distributed. The captain and quartermaster earned larger portions for their leadership, while gunners, surgeons, and carpenters also received bonuses for their skills. Ordinary sailors each got a full share, and even injured men were compensated, sometimes with half shares if they lost limbs in battle. This equality drew many to piracy, offering a chance at reward denied in rigid naval hierarchies. Still, disputes often flared. Greed could turn comrades into enemies when gold glittered in the sun. Some accused others of hiding valuables, and accusations of cheating could end in violence. The quartermaster's role was crucial, as he oversaw the distribution and kept tempers in check. His fairness meant the difference between unity and mutiny. Pirates knew that trust in the system was essential, for without it, envy and suspicion could tear a crew apart more surely than any enemy cannon. Once divided, the spoils quickly vanished into rum, gambling, or reckless spending in the next port. Few pirates kept wealth long. The sea demanded risk, and treasure was fleeting. Yet the memory of division, the laughter, the shining coins, the cheers of comrades, was as valuable as the riches themselves. It symbolized the brotherhood of piracy, where every man, scarred and weary, could share equally in the fortune wrested from the waves. Pirates have been immortalized in ballads and stories as adventurers chasing endless treasure, but the truth was far harsher. Daily life was not constant plunder, but endless labor, sickness, storms, and hunger. Their hammocks swung in dark, damp quarters, meals were foul, and death was a constant companion. Each dawn brought uncertainty, whether from disease, storm, or cannon fire. Every man knew he might not see another sunset. The dream of riches was real, but so too was the misery paid along the way. The fleeting moments of triumph, gold glittering on the deck, rum flowing after victory, songs echoing under the stars, were what sustained them. Yet such joys were always temporary. Treasure slipped quickly through their hands, squandered in ports or lost in storms, and wounds or disease often ended lives young. The very freedom they sought carried with it a price. Instability, danger, and the knowledge that the gallows or the sea awaited most of them. For all their bravado, pirates lived on borrowed time. Still, their ships carried a strange kind of democracy unknown on land. They chose captains, shared spoils fairly, and gave voices to men otherwise silenced by class or nation. In this sense, pirate life offered both oppression and liberation, brutal hardships bound with glimpses of freedom. Their codes of equality and defiance left a legacy stronger than any stolen chest of gold, inspiring tales long after their bones sank into the sea. The romance of piracy lies not in treasure or glory, but in endurance, the ability of rough, desperate men to carve brotherhood and fleeting joy out of the harshest of circumstances. To live as a pirate was to live fully in the present, aware that tomorrow might never come. Their legacy endures in myth and legend, but the reality remains. Pirate life was a gamble against the sea, paid for with hunger, fear, and blood, yet remembered as one of history's boldest pursuits of freedom.